Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way.
Hello! From the Next Reel's Film Board, this is Tommy Handsome with an important announcement. The following podcast includes movie audio clips that contain unbleeped profanity. Such profanity may include damn, hell, nuts, butter, McGee, doodle, Captain Fuck, and toot toot, here comes the diarrhea parade. Listening discretion is advised.
I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
I Shot Andy Warhol is over. The sick, irrational men, those who attempt to defend themselves against their disgustingness when they see the scum barreling down on them, will cling in terror to Big Mama with her big bouncy boobies. But boobies won't protect them against scum. Big Mama will be clinging to Big Daddy, who will be in the corner shitting in his forceful, dynamic pants. Men who are rational, however, won't kick or struggle or raise a distressing fuss, but will just sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and ride the waves to their demise.
Last night I was at Max's Kansas City. That's the chic hangout for the jet set of the world.
They called it the Factory.
Roger Vadim was there with Jane Fonda. Andy Warhol was there too.
A place to create art.
I'm writing a play and I want him to produce it.
Well, Andy just makes movies now.
Be discovered.
I did my Kim Novak for him, and he was very impressed.
And make a scene.
Oh, God, I hate morning. It is morning, isn't it?
There's a very important TV interview going on right now.
Great.
Just leave me the script and I'll make sure Andy gets it.
No.
But in this world where everyone was a superstar,
Andy, I gotta just talk to you for just a minute.
it took more than talent to get attention.
You want to kill all the men in the world? No, I don't think that would be necessary. You know, Andy, I really think you ought to produce a play. You know? Have you finished it yet? It's way too disgusting, even for us. So what does it have to take to get me on TV, huh?
If anyone can make you a star, Andy can.
I mean, you make something out of nothing, Andy.
What makes you think Andy Warhol, the greatest living artist of our time, wants to publish the ravings of a lunatic?
On my way, like David Testament. I shot Andy Warhol. Yeah, I had to. Yeah, he had too much control over my life.
Welcome to I Shot Andy Warhol.
The first of our Mary Harron series, kicking off our next series that we're going to be talking about here on the show. We've got 3 of her films lined up: This, American Psycho, and The Notorious Betty Page.
And why did we choose Mary Harron?
Well, one, she's a filmmaker who makes some interesting films that are worth talking about, and I think we're going to be talking about 3 of them. And I think that you have a crush on American Psycho.
Weird. It's so weird. I have an absolute crush on American Psycho. It pushes so many buttons for me. And so, yes, this was really a shoehorn excuse to get American Psycho in. I had never seen Andy Warhol or Betty Page. So what do I know? All I know is Mary Harron's awesome. She made American Psycho. I have loved talking about that movie in the past. I love teaching it. And so it's weird. Yeah, we'll see what happens. We start, however, with I Shot Andy Warhol, the story of Valerie Solanas, and she told me many times in this movie that I should read her manifesto. I don't know if she told you the same.
She
if
sure
you got
did.
that message
She
loud
did,
and clear.
Yes.
So I did. So I
Okay.
got the manifesto. Andy, what I read it was not a quote from the movie, although there are many quotes from the movie, from the manifesto in the movie throughout.
Yes.
They did use it quite liberally. Did you read any of the manifesto?
No.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. There is one point.
When you say rough, define rough. Is it just poorly written, or is it written in a way where it's just rage and anger? Or
she was not a terrible writer. It is. It's just a little bit mind blowing. If you don't mind, I have another passage I would like to read to you. Do you mind?
Please,
It's
do.
brief.
It's
right.
called The Scum Manifesto.
The Scum Manifesto.
Yes.
It's called The Scum Manifesto. Okay. She is talking a little bit about, use of men and men who are left over after the culling, the purge of the Scum Manifesto. She says, the few remaining men can exist out their puny days dropped out on drugs or strutting around in drag or passively watching the high-powered female in action, fulfilling themselves as spectators, vicarious livers, or breeding in the cow pasture with the toadies. Or they can go off to the nearest friendly neighborhood suicide center where they will be quietly, quickly, and painlessly gassed to death. And there is a footnote next to vicarious livers that is important. That footnote says, it will be electronically possible for him to tune in to any specific female he wants and follow her in detail, her every movement. The females will kindly, obligingly consent to this, as it won't hurt them in the slightest, and it is a marvelously kind and humane way to treat their unfortunate handicapped fellow beings. I mean, in the forward of this piece, and it's only the manifesto itself is only about 95 pages. It's not very long. The forward is half as long as the book itself. It talks about how this could be construed as satire, right? The Scum Manifesto.
Yeah.
It could be a satire, and it really could. I mean, the language is so out there throughout this thing, that it's hard not to read it with a side eye like that. The movie does not share that, I don't think. My impression of the movie is that, Harron's Valerie Solanas and Lili Taylor's Valerie Solanas took this character and this work very seriously, and that it was more a sign of her sort of emotional struggles that made this thing real. I don't know. What's your take on it?
I mean, the movie, like you said, it has pieces of the Scum Manifesto read by Lili Taylor, shot in black and white, almost like a performance piece, which is a pretty interesting way to kind of get us into that world and her insights, her views and everything. I also think that we need to pair it with the play that she writes, that is the play that she's pushing on Andy Warhol, saying that you'd be the perfect one to direct it. Let's do this.
This was up your ass.
Yeah, up your ass, because they perform pieces of it. We hear Andy and several of his groupies kind of reading it while they're sitting around in the factory and kind of mocking it as they read it. And then you see, on the flip side, you see Valerie and all of her friends, including Candy Darling and a number of others, just kind of performing it much more passionately in a cafe as they're kind of going through it. And you see the perspectives on the way that it can be interpreted, because you can just read it and it sounds just like garbage with all this turd eating and everything that's going on. And it's nonsense. But when they're actually performing it, you go, okay, well, maybe if it's read properly, you can see that there might be this angle where she's aware of the way that she's approaching her writing. And when it's interpreted the right way, yes, maybe it is something that can be seen as more intelligent rather than just kind of just the garbage that other people look at. I have a hard time really clicking completely with it. I can see it being read seriously, but at the same time, I don't know if she's writing it from that satirical perspective. I feel like there's an element of it that's just anger, and I don't know. I haven't read all of it. I have a hard time seeing a lot of the intellect coming out of it, though, the satire coming out of it. It just seems like it's just kind of, she's just kind of putting all this out there, and I don't know how much clarity I find in it.
Well, and now that I've seen this, and obviously American Psycho, have not seen Betty Page. Curious how this theme, ties these together. But Harron does something really exceptionally well in Psycho that I think she's doing here. The Scum Manifesto, and I should say it is an acronym, the Society for Cutting Up Men. What the Scum Manifesto does, and her actively sort of promoting it, and her efforts to get Up Your Ass produced by Andy Warhol, all of that actually serves to take our protagonist, our main character in Valerie Solanas, and demonstrate her aloneness, right? Her otherness. She has very few friends, and the friends that she does have don't seem to really like her very much. It's all sort of associated around their drug use and sex, and her, her efforts to make a dime as a sex worker. She has a unique kind of charisma that establishes connections early on, and not strong connections, right? Not connections that seem to foster, obviously, a career for her, because she's so lost in her own rage that she can't quite get everybody else to buy into. And I think that's an important sort of trait that Harron is, I think, pretty good at demonstrating. I don't like Valerie Solanas in this movie. I don't like my experience with her at all, but I do feel like I can empathize a little bit with her living apart.
I think that's what this type of movie, when it's done well, I think that's the strength of it, because I don't think anyone is really supposed to like Valerie. She's a very unlikable character. She's full of hate. She's full of rage, just disconnected from life. But we see elements of her life that allow us to empathize with how she was raised. I mean, this is a young kid who, ended up, starting to have a, thrust into the world of sex at the age of 13, very young, and not in pretty ways. And, has really kind of grown to have this anger that she really carries with her everywhere. And, she's always upset about stuff. I feel like this is an interesting look at unchecked mental illness. I don't think it's ever really discussed, other than the fact that they do end up putting her in an asylum for the criminally insane, which sounded like straight out of, Arkham Asylum at the end. When you see that, it's like, really? Wow, that's
exactly what I thought.
I didn't think that they actually called them that, but I guess they did back then. I just can't help but feeling like there was more going on with her that people just dismissed because of the way that she just kind of went about her life. But in reality, she probably needed more help than she ever got, but people just didn't put the time or energy in when she was younger. And it led to this kind of this way that she grew up, living, I don't know if I would say homeless, but certainly on the streets. I mean, she was living on a rooftop for a while before she was able to, Candy helped her get into that place, and then eventually slowly moving up, but largely just by prostituting herself. And it just wasn't a pretty life. And I think that she took the anger and rage that she felt and she kind of brought it out there through her writing. And obviously with her frustration at the kind of the perpetual dismissals by Andy Warhol, took it to the worst extreme by trying to kill him. And it's a very unlikable character, but I can't help but feel that the way that Lili Taylor performs it, the way that Mary Harron directs it, that we're not meant to find some empathy with her, even if we don't like her.
Well, I think that's why Harron picked her, right? That's why she found her own interest in Solanas as her protagonist for this thing, because she was at this time in her life and career, she was at a crossroads too. And sounds like she was feeling alone and she was feeling uncertain and was frustrated about options, what options were open to her and what were not. And I think it makes this great fodder for, creative output. I wonder, I don't know. Do you know much about Warhol beyond this film? Are you a Warhol? Are you a Warholic?
Warholic. It's funny. I feel like as I watched this movie, I'm like, I feel like I've seen like my perspective. I've never seen any films by Andy Warhol. I've certainly seen art by Andy Warhol. I've never, other than like a bit character, kind of that quirky character in films, as kind of played by other people, not Andy Warhol himself. I feel like I've never really known much about Andy Warhol. It's just, he's such a presence because the funky art style that he had, like with the Marilyn Monroes or the Campbell soup cans or whatever it was, that was kind of that Warhol style of art. I mean, that's really my sense of him. So I don't know much about him. I'm certainly not a Warholic like some people may be.
I guess, if you're a Warholic, you would have watched all of Andy Warhol's Sleep, and I have not. That is not something I've done. It is on YouTube though. You can go get it. I wonder how much your experience with the movie and maybe positive experience with the movie is tied to understanding, Warhol and his place in pop culture. Because like you, I've seen the paintings, I've seen some of his image work, photography work, and clips of films. I've never seen an entire film of Andy Warhol's all the way through, and frankly, I've never really been that interested. I can't say this movie has really piqued my interest in Warhol. It's obviously this is very much Valerie Solanas' story. It doesn't necessarily have to be Warhol's story, but I think because I find the Warholness part of this story shallow, I struggle with why Valerie went so far as to shoot him. Like, I just feel like I know it's a true story. I'm not entirely sure the movie convinced me that it was the next most rational thing for in her head to do.
I saw it as this is just kind of this. She hits this point where she's really spiraling down by this particular point in the film. She feels betrayed by, all these men in her life at this particular point. I mean, she's got this agent that she's hired, Maurice Garodius, played by Lothar Bluteau, who seems to have kind of had her sign this deal and now has all the rights to this thing that she's writing. And she's very upset by that. She can't get a hold of him. She also feels betrayed by Andy Warhol, who she thinks has kind of agreed to produce her play, even though he never really has. And so I think that she's hit this point where she's, coming up from that place of the Scum Manifesto. And we see it going all the way back to when she started at the University of Maryland earlier in the film, I think almost 11 years really before she shoots him, really is kind of already in this mental place where men are the enemy. And then with all of the work through Scum Manifesto, we see her a number of times with various Johns as she's prostituting herself out, clearly not having any joy out of it, and just looks at men as this evil in the world. And she's just, I think by the time she gets to the end, she's really pinned in by these two guys, and she just feels incredibly trapped. And she's not getting the support anymore by Candy or Stevie. Stevie kicks her out because she has the gun. And I think
they've all let her go.
Yeah, I think if Stevie hadn't pushed her out in that particular place, I don't know, the film made me feel like I don't think she would have gone to that length. I think that because she was just kind of pushed out by every single person, and she felt so trapped by these two men. Maurice wasn't around. She went to his office, and he was out of the country or whatever for a while. And I think Andy was the only one who was around. And I think that she just hit this breaking point, and this is how I interpreted the film. She had to do something. And so Andy was it. He was the one who was around, and he's always kind of floating in and out of her life. And he was so mild, the way that he always was kind of there and just kind of like, oh, hey, Valerie, like he never dismissed her. He just was very chill about everything. And the way that it hit her is like, he's as guilty as everyone else right now, because he said he'd produce my play, even though he never really does. He won't give the copy back. That, I think, was the thing that was infuriating her more than anything, is because she just wanted that copy back, and they probably threw it away. And so it turned into this breaking point. And so she, that was the one thing that she could do. And that's how I interpreted it. So I feel like for me, I bought into her, boiling over and shooting him. I thought it was effective.
I guess I can see that. I think I lost track after she went to see the publisher, because he's the one who took an active role in taking advantage of her, right?
Yeah.
Like he duped her, and had he been there, he would have been shot, right?
That was how I interpreted that as well. Okay. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. All right.
And I think that was probably where she was targeting her energies. Because of that, he just wasn't around, and he was.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And that all the more, cements the whole notion of her aloneness, the fact that it's her story, not Andy Warhol's, despite, right, obviously what's in the title. He is an important character by accident.
Oh, I think absolutely. Yeah, I think that it becomes that.
Yeah. All right. I like the way the movie uses time. It's we get sort of a logarithmic scale. Time, we get a nice early motion, and then time starts to compress leading up to the event.
Well, and it certainly is one of those films that starts at the end. We see, as it opens, we see the body laying on the floor. We see the blood. We hear the voice say, "There's the elevator, Valerie, take it." We hear those moments. We see the wig laying on the floor, which I just have to say, I don't know why I always assumed Andy Warhol just like either bleached his hair or something. I had no idea that he was wearing a wig all of this time. Again, I'm not a Warholic.
I didn't either. Not until I saw your note did I catch that he's wearing a wig.
Yeah. That kind of floored me. I'm like, oh, wow. That totally surprised me. So strange.
Yeah, that was very strange.
But so we see these moments. We see the police walking her out, asking her, "Why'd you do it? What happened?" We see her being interrogated. Then we see her going into the kind of the place where she's being studied, and kind of the psychiatry and all of that. And at that point, we start, like, through their conversations, we start getting these flashbacks to her life as a 13-year-old, and we see like family home movies and stuff like that. And then we jump back to University of Maryland, 1957, when she's a student and she hates men and she's, miserable. And then that kind of pushes us forward into these points. And it really does. I mean, it really focuses 66 to 68, that period when she meets Andy Warhol, and really where all of this is kind of coming to it, the point in the fall of 1968 when she does finally shoot Andy.
Yeah. Okay. And the event itself is pretty it's pretty low key. She walks in, she shoots him a couple of times, doesn't shoot the assistant guy.
And that's what makes me think there's a lot more mental instability, like what was going on in her head, the way that she was like, she would go up to somebody like she was going to shoot him, and then she wouldn't, and then she would, and pull the trigger, and like those different
no bullets
things
in the gun.
Yeah, it's just like it was. I had a feeling like there was this mental place that she was in during that period that I don't know. I don't think that she was completely there, and it's so interesting because it seemed so planned out, thought about. She seemed to, like, when she was talking to the police, she's just like, yeah, I shot him. And they're like, why? And she's like, I'll get to that. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but there's things, and she had kind of this whole idea. And even immediately afterward, we see her go up to a police officer, give him the gun. She's like, here, I have this for you. The police are looking for me. I just shot Andy Warhol. And she seems to, it's like such a perspective of like, complete acknowledgement of everything that she's done and accepting the guilt, accepting all of that. But I couldn't help but think that there still was a mental disconnect between what she was doing and any emotional reaction from it.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like there's this dissociative like disorder. Like she went into this other space, this like rage space that allowed her to be kind of ironically calm in the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
Is there a syndrome? Eye of the storm syndrome? It feels very much like she was emotionally in the middle of this emotional storm, and that allowed her to both see clearly and take such violent action. And she exists in this world. I want to talk about some of the other standout characters, because there are a lot of people in this movie,
right?
But we need to talk about Jared Harris, who plays Andy Warhol, and seeing where he has come in his career. Going back to revisit the wigged Warhol version of Harris was a real treat.
I mean, I had seen him in films before this without realizing who he was, because he
was still just one of the faces.
He's a bit player, and stuff like Far and Away, Last of the Mohicans, The Public Eye, Natural Born Killers, Smoke, Blue in the Face. Like, he did a lot of bit parts all the way through these films, and I largely in this film, I think he still is. He's performing obviously an incredibly famous character, but he is low key in the role, playing, from what I saw of some Andy Warhol clips. He really kind of is capturing that low key nature that Andy Warhol has. But it's not until much later, probably in the, I don't know when he really started taking off for me. I don't know. I feel like Benjamin Button is where I really started noticing him.
Yeah.
And he really seemed to kind of take off from there. But I mean, I don't think that's really completely fair, because he's been acting since the late 80s and always busy in bit parts.
Yeah, it's crazy. And he's so good. I mean, he so embodies the character, even though he is a really unique, like, he's not one of those generic looking and sounding guys. Like, he really has his own tone. And yet, I mean, he just disappears into Warhol for me. He just disappears.
Well, yeah, I think he's just really capturing that laid back American character who just is chill, who always seems just kind of there. And it's almost like this disconnect from things, but I don't know if that's completely fair. I just feel like I feel like it's almost observational. Like that's kind of how I was reading Andy Warhol. The way that he's portraying is he's just observing things that are going on, and he's kind of taking all of that in, which I think may be kind of a lot of the style of Warhol as both an artist and a filmmaker.
Yeah. You said Natural Born Killers. I'd forgotten he was even in it. That's really interesting. Someone who's had quite an extensive career, far greater extent of a career in show business than even Jared Harris, is Martha Plimpton, who, she's a Goonie.
She's a Goonie.
She is the friend here. I mean, she's playing Stevie. She's the friend. She's, helping Valerie as she kind of moves through life. And I think she's great. She's a great confidant. It was fun to see her in this kind of a role.
Yeah, she was. I couldn't help but wish there was more of her. Like, I felt like it was exciting to see her pop up a few times earlier on in the film. And then she kind of disappears from it for a while and drops in as needed, I felt. And I suppose that's probably how it felt for her in Valerie's world anyway. But still, I thought she did well in the role. I really enjoyed seeing her again. She's just one of those people I always loved seeing from early on, like The Goonies, The Mosquito Coast, and Running on Empty, stuff like that. Like, she always was fun to see. And so I think she's great here.
Who else really stands out to you in the cast? Who else do you want to talk about?
I mean, Michael Imperioli is one of the people who is kind of a Warhol. I don't know if they're real groupies or whatever, but he certainly is a face that people have grown to see. I think largely because The Sopranos, that was the big thing that he was in. But certainly is a very popular actor. But for me, the other big standout in the film was Stephen Dorff playing Candy Darling. I think that he was really great to see him in this role that was just not what I am kind of generally associate with Stephen Dorff. He seems like such a masculine actor in kind of these more action types of roles, and seeing him doing something like this, I thought was really great. I'm like, this is nice to see him taking this totally different shift in his career to play Candy Darling and really pull it off, I thought, incredibly well. I really enjoyed him throughout the film. Yeah,
I mean, talk about a movie that demonstrates an actor's range. I think he just nailed it. And you go back and think about, like, for me, I knew Stephen Dorff from Blade. Like, that's 1998. That's when I took notice of Stephen Dorff. And but man, the guy has chops to be able to so beautifully embody Candy Darling as an acolyte of and inspiration to Andy Warhol. And I mean, it was just terrific. And I thought it was just terrific. Now, it's an interesting part because, he's playing Candy Darling, and there is another actor playing Jeremiah Newton. Danny Morgenstern's playing Jeremiah Newton, and the movie is actually based on Jeremiah Newton's book about his experience with Candy Darling in the world of Andy Warhol. And the book is called My Face for the World to See, The Diaries, Letters, and Drawings of Candy Darling, Andy Warhol Superstar. And it's hard to get. I think you can pay $1,000 to get a hardcover copy of it on Amazon. It is not in print. It hasn't been Kindled. It's just, your mileage may vary, but that's the book. And so, like, this all comes from these tales of Candy Darling's experience in this world, and her as a diarist, which I think is interesting because so much of the book is focused, or so much of the movie is focused on Valerie Solanas' experience writing her Scum Manifesto, that it's easy to get lost in the fact that that's not actually what the book is or what the movie is based upon in its tale.
Well, and it's interesting because looking at the origin of this story, Mary Harron, she had been writing. She did a lot of writing as a music journalist for a while for Punk magazine. Yeah. She was the first journalist to actually interview the Sex Pistols for an American publication. Amazing. Very into the punk scene, and was trying to kind of figure out what she wanted to do. She was doing going to do a documentary. She was producing Edge on PBS, which explored pop culture. And that's where she kind of learned about Valerie Solanas, wanted to do this story, and suggested, let's do this. And they were going to do it as a documentary, but they actually pushed her to develop it into this feature film. And she says, actually, Andy Warhol actually helped sell her on the idea of focusing on Solanas, not him, in the film, which is interesting. And
that seems so Warhol, doesn't it? Like that, just knowing the little I know, totally that's a Warhol thing. Oh, darling, make me a bit player.
Right. But I think that using these other, properties, and I think a lot of it was when they were trying to find stuff to use of Valerie Solanas for this documentary, they could find nothing. Like there was no footage of her. It was hard getting people who would agree to talk about her on camera and all this sort of stuff. Like there just wasn't much out there. And so that's why they decided to kind of do this fictional version. But I think that's also why they probably latched onto using this other book that focused more on the relationship with Candy Darling to help get into that world, so we could see more of like what was going on with kind of the way that there was that connection with Newton and Darling and all that sort of stuff in this particular period of time.
I couldn't find out, early in the movie, there are some clips, some old footage that's brought into the film of, girls playing and beating each other up on a playground. Do you happen to know if that was legit Valerie Solanas footage, or did they recreate that?
I could find nothing. I also looked to see if that was actual real footage or if it was something. I'm assuming that they didn't get permission. They didn't find any family members who the way that Solanas grew up, I kind of didn't have a sense that they probably had a camera, to be filming family footage.
Yeah.
So my sense was they probably created it for the film.
So stylistically, it's interesting because it does, even though it's, I'm taking it as sort of a foregone conclusion that all this stuff was recreated for the film.
Yeah.
It feels in parts very much like a documentary, like it moves in and out of this sort of fictionalized tale. I think intelligently. And again, that coupled with sort of moving us through time, I think it effectively tells her story in, as solid a way as you can get without it being, without having a character that you like spending time with.
Yeah. And it is interesting because, like you said, it's hard to spend time with her, but we do have those moments. Like there are a few moments where she's trying to find connection, like we see her at one of Andy's parties and she's kind of pining for this woman who's across the room and trying to have these conversations with her because she thinks she's actually really beautiful and wants to create a connection there. But again, a lot of it is Valerie's personality. It's really kind of pushes people away because it's very abrasive and it's a little difficult to take. And so you can see when she's having these, trying to create these connections with these people that they're not clicking because she is a harder person to connect with. And so I think that makes it hard. And I think that also helps us empathize with her because we see she's like everyone. She's just trying to find a connection with another person.
Yeah, she is. She's got it's that weird sort of frontal lobe thing, that bit that's flipped where every conversation, I think this is one of the things that Lily Taylor does really well. Every conversation that gets started becomes a conversation about her.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think she asks somebody else a question that isn't self-serving in some way, shape, or form throughout the entire film. She's not. She's a social creature that just takes.
Yeah.
And that fuels a lot of the rage, right? That fuels a lot of the rage. It feels like she's, she can manifest that sense that she can feel herself being ignored.
And Lily Taylor, we just have to talk about Lily Taylor a bit because, she had been performing up before this. She had certainly been around for, I think she started acting in the late 80s and she's having a baby, Mystic Pizza, Say Anything. We just talked about her last week on Born on the 4th of July. And this is 96 when she's doing this. This is her 18th film.
Yeah.
She had been doing a lot of work, just largely in much smaller bit parts. I think Dogfight may have been the biggest role she had up to this point. Say Anything, certainly. I don't know. Mystic Pizza, JoJo, she was pretty big. So I don't know. I think she's
I just feel like Say Anything was the most iconic of those character performances. I feel like that's the one that's most memorable for me, for sure. She said she was a great friend.
Yeah, she was. Yeah. So certainly somebody who's been doing great work all this time. Somebody who I think from this film, people were kind of expecting her to get a lot more notice and to find some more solid, bigger roles that I just don't think ever really manifested. And I don't know if that's because she is one of those kind of indie actors who seems to perform better and prefer working in the indie scene rather than in the big film scene. She did The Haunting a few years after that. That was probably her and Ransom actually the same year.
Yeah.
I think that she fluctuates between the bigger Hollywood stuff and the smaller films, but I feel like when you look at her career, largely it's bigger roles in the indie films, and then she seems to dip into the Hollywood scene to just take supporting roles just to kind of probably fuel her, kind of keep her pocketbook full, you know?
It wasn't long ago that I sat down and watched Public Enemies, Michael Mann's film from 2009 with Johnny Depp, and she's in it, and I couldn't have told you that.
Right.
Talk about a bit part. Like, I don't actually remember her role in that movie, which maybe says more about the movie.
But then, like, you know, a few years later, she did The Conjuring, and I totally, I loved seeing her pop up in that, and she did a great job with that. And came back with the same kind of horror vibe with The Nun a few years later.
Oh, she was in Almost Human. What a show that should not have been canceled. Carl Urban, Michael Ealy, and Minka Kelly. What a great, fun science fiction show that was. I totally remember her in that show. She was great. Fox.
A lot of TV.
Oh, that's right. You don't watch TV. Hoi polloi.
But I mean, TV also. 6 Feet Under, Hemlock Grove, American Crime, Perry Mason. She was just in that quite a bit.
She's also somebody who doesn't actually appear to age. Like, she has that face where I think she could go play the Say Anything role today.
You know, you might have something to that.
Yeah. Okay. Camera, Ellen Kuras.
The vibe of this film, the changes that they choose to go between black and white for the manifesto, stand-ups that they're doing, and just everything else. It feels very kind of raw, gritty documentary. Like, it definitely has a feel that I think captures this time, this place, this world.
Yeah.
Quite well. And Ellen Kuras, I mean,
we've talked about her.
I mean, she had already been working quite a bit before this, and really takes off after this with Spike Lee. We talked about her recently on Bamboozled when we did that. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Sunshine.
Yeah. So certainly
that one is the one
busy.
that has the most sort of parallels, sort of visual parallel to this film. Like, I feel like the way the film handles time passing and the internal experience of time on film, I think, is really smart. With in partnership with Keith Reamer and the edit booth, I think it was great.
Definitely a film that the editing was pretty important, just kind of compressing the time as we kind of flew through the decade and then those last few years, and then knowing when to cut in with those bits of the manifesto and how they would tie in, because that's always tricky. When you're telling a story like this and then you have something that's not part of the story but is an informing element for the story that just kind of gets thrust in periodically, that can be tricky to determine when best to lay that in. And so, Keith Reamer, along with Mary Harron, I think they found a way to bring those pieces of the Scum Manifesto in that worked. Like, it never pulled me out of the film. It always actually helped kind of inform what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when she's reading about the failed chromosome, talking about the XY chromosome, and she's doing it over, like, you can see her clearly writing something in her lab notebook, and she's studying psychology in school, and she's holding a rat by its tail, and that sort of thematic background to the narration made the narration more meaningful than just some other random voiceover. Like, I think it was smart, and because it could become voiceover heavy really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think this movie avoids that.
Yeah. And what I love about the Scum Manifesto is it allows us to have some form of voiceover without having to do kind of narration about her life. It puts us into her mental space and the way that she's seeing things. So I found it incredibly effective.
John Cale, man behind the music.
Yeah, interesting kind of controversy with the music, because John Cale was of the Velvet Underground, wrote the score for this, and Lou Reed apparently protested it quite a bit, had issues with Cale doing the music for this particular film. I'm not exactly sure why. I think it was just because it was perhaps focusing on Valerie. And I didn't find any specifics. Did you read anything about that?
No, just the same that you did, that same sort of controversy. I don't know why that Lou Reed was so upset about that, but he certainly was. Notwithstanding the fact that the music, I think, was great.
Yeah, the music is great. They had, the music itself is good. And then they had Yola Tango. They played a band that was supposed to be kind of a Velvet Underground-ish type of band in the film, which I thought they did a great job kind of playing that vibe throughout. But I think the music works. And so, yeah, I would love to know really what was going on with Lou Reed and John Cale about kind of the background of this. Obviously, there's a lot of connection. I think it's one of those things where when you're personally connected to a story, I think it ends up potentially opening up a lot of wounds. And I think that can be, that's all I can think of, is there must be something like that happened with all of this.
He's done a lot of movies. And his top 4 on IMDb: American Psycho, great; The Beach, great score; Brick, come on; and Smokin' Aces.
Well, and to be just to point out, The Beach, Brick, and Smokin' Aces, they're all because the soundtracks. I think that they probably
because he's on the soundtrack.
Yeah, because he wrote some of the songs that happened to play in those films.
Right.
I think actual composer for a movie, though,
American
he still
Psycho,
is very busy.
He is composer on that one.
And then in between the two, between this and that, he'll do Basquiat also. So certainly, I think connecting, that's another one that kind of connects with kind of the world of this story.
Yeah, right. How to Do It award season.
I mean, it's an indie film. It wasn't hugely noticed. It was, and I say it's an indie film. It's a hard one to watch. And I think because of that, it didn't get a lot of recognition. It had 5 wins, 7 other nominations. At Cannes Film Festival, it played in the, I think, Un Certain Regard. And it ended up getting nominated for the Golden Camera, but lost to Love Serenade. At the Film Independent Spirit Awards, it was nominated for Best First Feature for Mary Harron, but lost to Billy Bob Thornton's Sling Blade. And at Sundance Film Festival, Lily Taylor actually won a special jury prize for her acting. The film itself was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize for Dramatic Film, but lost to Todd Solance's Welcome to the Dollhouse.
I don't think I have a problem with any of those, although I haven't seen Love Serenade.
I haven't seen Love Serenade either. I can't speak to that, but I mean, it
but
is
the Sling Blade loss. That feels about right.
I certainly agree.
Sling Blade. Well, then I guess we have to talk about the box office. Man, this one probably put you to work.
Even though this is a relatively recent film, it is working on an indie budget, so I could find nothing about how much Harron had to work with initially. And knowing that it was originally planned as a TV documentary, it means the budget likely was even more difficult to track down. There's just nothing out there. This movie did release May 1st, 1996, and was obviously the limited release indie film among bigger films like The Quest, The Truth About Cats and Dogs, Mulholland Falls, and Sunset Park. This also opened opposite another indie favorite, Cemetery Man. What a fun one that one is. This film played limited indie theaters for about 2/3 of a year and ended up earning just under $1.9 million all told, or just over $3 million in today's dollars. Unfortunately, without the budget info, that is about as far as I can get.
So we'll have to make it up.
That's right.
It did great.
It was fantastic.
Well, it's a hell of a movie to kick off the series. I don't know what I expected going into I Shot Andy Warhol. I didn't know anything about the story. I didn't know anything about what it was about, the true story. I don't think I actually even knew that Andy Warhol was shot.
Yeah, I think until this movie came out, I don't think I knew that either. And honestly, I don't think I knew that he survived it. Like, I think I saw this title and just assumed, I didn't know that he had been murdered.
That's how he died.
Yeah.
Right.
and that was actually interesting for me, honestly, reading the end, kind of the footnotes at the end of the film about how she was in this place for the criminally insane for 3 years, 10 years. I can't remember how long it was. And then she was released and was in and out of homelessness until she died, living on the streets. And I was like, wow, that is a dark way for her life to go. Clearly nobody bothered checking to see, is there help that they could have provided her, which was just real tragic. And then Andy Warhol, it was interesting to see, yes, he survived, but this was certainly something that affected him for the rest of his life. And he died in the mid 80s, and it was something that I think right up to the end was difficult for him. And you saw that interesting scene when he's, going somewhere and there's a bang, like a car backfires or something. And it's very much that PTSD sort of reaction, like, still living in that moment. And I can imagine. So I found it to be an interesting and eye-opening bit of history that I just knew nothing about.
I did too. And so I don't know how, I think that might have impacted my rating of the film.
Okay.
I enjoyed my experience with it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I'm going to land on the stars even yet. So let's take it to that.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this fair show. If you swipe over in your show notes and tap the word Flickchart, it should take you straight to this movie in the Flickchart database, where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours.
All right, first up, we have I Shot Andy Warhol, or Il Postino, the postman.
Il Postino.
Il Postino. I Shot Andy Warhol, or Rabid.
Rabid.
We'll take Rabid. I Shot Andy Warhol, or Labor Day.
I Shot Andy Warhol.
I'll take Labor Day.
There's just so much more interesting stuff going on in Andy Warhol.
Yeah, you're right. I'll give you Andy Warhol. I Shot Andy Warhol, or Post-Mortem. I'll take Post-Mortem. Yeah. I Shot Andy Warhol, or Star Trek Into Darkness.
I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
I got problems with Star Trek Into Darkness, but I am a nerd.
I know. I'll take Star Trek also.
All right, Star Trek.
I Shot Andy Warhol, or Conan the Barbarian.
I Shot Andy Warhol.
I'll take Conan.
All right, I'll give it to you.
Okay. I Shot Andy Warhol, or Amour. I'll take Amour.
Yes, I will also take Amour. Enthusiastically.
I Shot Andy Warhol, or Gone with the Wind.
I Shot Andy Warhol.
I mean, there are good things about Gone with the Wind. I'll say Gone with the Wind.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Scissors.
All right, you get it.
Gone with the Wind takes it. I Shot Andy Warhol, or Year of the Dragon.
Andy Warhol.
I'll take Andy Warhol also. Well, that lands I Shot Andy Warhol in spot 439 on our chart. 439 out of 502. That puts it at a 13%. 13%.
That's pretty low.
It is pretty low.
I certainly didn't have that kind of an opinion of it in my own flick chart. How'd it do for yours?
It's a tricky film because it's a hard film to watch. It's not a film that I would jump back into right away. I think that the performances are strong. It's an interesting story, but it is a hard story about an unlikable character. So that makes it challenging to watch. And because of that, it ended up doing fairly poorly on my flick chart. It landed in spot 3136 out of 4594, or a 32%.
Interesting. I ended up at 558 out of 1495. That's a 63%, which surprised me. I honestly thought it was going to fall straight to the bottom. But, Flickchart does what it does.
Yep.
If I'm to go by the algorithm for letterboxd.com/thenextreel, this should be a 3-star film out of 5. Wow. So torn on that. I see 3 stars and I think it's a better film than that. Maybe is it 3.5, 4 stars, but no heart? Is it 2 stars with a heart? I don't know what to do.
Well, for me, it ended up being 3 stars and no heart. That's where I am with this one. It's a tough film, and it's so hard to watch and want to rewatch. But I think that Lily Taylor shines in this role. It's a tough role to play, and she owns it. She does such a great job with it. But it's a hard one. So 3 stars with no heart.
All right, 3 stars, no heart. I'll do it too.
Okay, that's where we sit. Andy. 3 stars, no heart.
And that means next week we get to move into American Psycho.
That's right, American Psycho, Mary Harron's film from 2000 with Christian Bale.
Did you ever read the book?
Nope. Bret Easton Ellis's book that it's based on, I did not.
I just want to say, that's a book. It's the only book I can think of in my memory that as I was reading it, I remember that visceral feeling during certain sequences of needing to vomit.
Wow.
It was such a hard read in some places.
Interesting.
The movie doesn't even begin to approach how hard the book is to read. So
fascinating. That is fascinating. Well, when the movie ends,
our conversation begins. Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth. And thanks to our friends over at Letterboxd who do provide Next Reel members with a 20% discount for their upgrades on their memberships. Just go to thenextreel.com/Letterboxd. Mine
is a 3.5 star. I just went in the middle. I thought, here's the middle. I'm going to go in the middle.
Okay.
I know. So because they bring up some things in here that I really like.
Okay, I like that.
Comes from Lester. 3.5. This was always on IFC or Sundance growing up in high school, and I always had a certain fondness to it, especially Lily Taylor's performance, which I still think is excellent. I was also a huge 6 Feet Under fan back then. On another note, great that we saw American Psycho before this because Taylor and Chloe Sevigny dominated the world of 90s American indie film. Strains itself a little too much in an effort to make Happening Factory seem cooler than it probably was. But seeing Yo La Tengo cosplay as the Velvet Underground was fun. One thing that I thought would age terribly is the portrayal of factory staple Candy Darling, but her character, played by Stephen Dorff, is arguably the most fleshed out of the whole group, including Andy. Because of Solanas' radical feminist theory explicitly front and center, this is probably the worst Women's History Month thing we're going to watch for March. I'm pretty satisfied with the way she's sympathetically portrayed here while not letting her off the hook for any problematic things she has said or done in her life. The movie is particularly engrossing when the film is coming into terms with how Solanas is as a person. 3.5 stars. Thanks, Lester.
Thanks. It's a good one. I thought you were going to read the one about Lou Reed's song.
Yeah, but it's would take me it's 8,000 words. It'd take me about 25 minutes to read.
You should just read that one part, just so we at least have it in the show.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll do that. So this is from Sally Jane Black, who wrote an extended review with no rating. It is clear why Lou Reed would be upset with this movie. His scathing rant of a song calls for Valerie Solanas' death, and it was written decades after the incident in question. It's a testament to Reed's ability to convey his pain and distress in such direct and simple lyrics. It's autobiographical more than anything else, and even when he sings about how sickness not being an excuse, I don't hear the bloodlust and cry for vengeance, but the agony and regret made all the clearer by the fact that he spends most of the song in his signature sing-talking about how Warhol remonstrated him for not visiting while he was in the hospital. To Lou Reed, Valerie Solanas wasn't a human being, which was, of course, the problem.
Interesting.
The song that we're talking about here is I Believe.
Gotcha.
Which you can find on YouTube.
Well, thanks for that little bit of history. That's
You're
good to know. Now we have an answer.
We do.
Well, I have a 2.5 star rated film by Bo Pratt. Bo has this to say about the film. It feels pretty reductive to center a picture on Valerie Solanas around her shooting Andy Warhol, and it feels pretty reductive to revolve one praise of the picture about Valerie Solanas centered on Andy Warhol by mentioning foremost Jared Harris and his amazing wig. But that's what I'm doing. Jared Harris, baby!
Nice.
There it is.
Excellent.
Thanks, Letterboxd.
Thanks, Letterboxd. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchase is made through our links. Give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We covered a lot of great movies that were adapted from other material in Season 10.
Our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals is where listeners can purchase the source material behind all our adapted film discussions. It helps support the show at no extra cost when you buy through our links.
In our foreign language Best Picture nominees series, we looked at several adaptations, including Z, The Postman Il Postino, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Letters from Iwo Jima.
We hit the high seas with In the Heart of the Sea from Nathaniel Philbrick's nonfiction book for our Aquatic Killers series.
Definitely a weaker entry in that series.
I bet the book is better.
Oh, me too.
Member bonus episodes featured adaptations like Gone Girl, The Russia House, Ivanhoe, The Hot Rock, The Big Heat, and Naked Lunch.
Oliver Stone brought not just original stories, but also adaptations like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, Year of the Dragon, 8 Million Ways to Die, Talk Radio, and Born on the 4th of July.
Mary Harron's disturbingly insightful American Psycho was adapted from the Bret Easton Ellis book.
You like Huey Lewis in the News?
Oh my God, it even has a watermark.
And of course, more Stephen King with The Mist, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption for our King a la Darabont series.
Find links to all of these books and more adapted films on our originals page. That's thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports our show.
Get the full list of books that we've talked about and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.